very serious topic today, but we're going to bring light to it because the whole purpose of this movement and the song that we are instigating has to do with what are we standing for and not against? What are we standing for and not against? And one of the biggest concerns that so many of us are having is these active shooters and the amount of predators, from sexual predators to bullies to how do we deal with this? Well, let me tell you about these two humans because you are all going to be like on the floor, because if there are two people in this world who can help us solve these issues, these are the two people. So Nancy Osborne was 17 years old. She was like running away from her home and she went into the military. She was the very first female, she's Canadian like me, although I'm in the New York now.
I was not the very first, but I was one of the first.
She was one of the very first female military police in Canada, didn't have a formal education except for high school, rose all the way up to major. Then she goes on to be the very first female UN security officer. Did I get that right?
Advisor in the field, yeah.
In the field. So what that means is she went to over 40 countries and basically negotiated safe passage for women and children with like,
no, for
you with like, what? Like, no, you understand. When we were developing our talk a few years ago, she's telling me the story of how she's in the Sudan with a guy who's like started the genocide in the middle of the desert as a woman by herself with a bunch of guys sitting there in the desert with all their AR rifles negotiating. And I'm like, okay, so so she knows a thing or two about predators and how we deal with them and how we can stand strong for something else. And then of course there's Gene. Gene is a new client to mine. We love Christina Dates, my business partner. I love him so much. Oh my God, so much. He's so brilliant. Okay, former commander.
Right, that's a little heavy. I'm about brilliant.
Yeah, I know who's listening.
Now it's story time.
Now it's story time. Okay, so hold on. I need to bring my tea closer. Okay, see, I'm getting this set up. I need my tea. So every time we're like working with him on his pitches for the media and everything else we're doing, he's amazing. This guy's like a former commanding SWAT officer. And I asked him in sessions, I'm like, so you're literally like busting into buildings, like, aren't you scared? I'd be like, and gun, and hide, and hide. So we have probably the most qualified possible people here to talk about this issue. So let's talk about the active shooters, okay? And I want opinions from both of you. What do you think is the #1 problem that you see, and I'm gonna start with you, Gene, of what the action that's been taken so far and where the missing pieces are? Talk to us about why the action has, because we just see this increase in active shooters and not a decrease, and yet apparently there's lots of action being taken to stop this and it's not happening. Can you give us an insight into why that is?
Yeah, so essentially what's happening right now is, I mean, these are horrific events and they're very emotionally charged. You're talking about very innocent people, you know, vulnerable people, children, and you know, doctors, nurses that are getting killed, all these, you know, anyone in these situations that really had no idea it was coming. And so our response is an emotional response, and everyone always says we need training so we know how to resolve these issues if it happens to us. And that's flawed thinking. In my opinion, it's flawed thinking, because you're now waiting for something to happen to do something about it, when in fact there are so many things that you can do to stop it. Because every single shooter that has been there, it's not just guns, by the way. I mean, we're talking about people that use knives, cars. It fits all the categories. So the weapon isn't so as important as the person committing the crime. But the bottom line is they will actually leak the information that they're going to do it, especially when you're talking about school shooters. School shooters, you know, children are more inclined to go online and social media and sort of release that information that they're going to do it. Some of them will come right out and say, I'm going to be a school shooter. Some of them will do it a little more subtly. They'll tell friends, things like that. You know, when you get to an adult level, you don't really go online. You're a little more private, but there's still people that are close to them that they will start to give clues that they're doing something about it. They're going to take action. They're going to commit these crimes. And we're not focusing on that. We're not focusing on teaching people how to identify that issue. Identify the person before they become a shooter, and that's really where we need to start focusing on. Because if the training that's being done right now, which is good, run, hide, fight is good. There's a lot of different variations of it. They're all good. But if that worked, we would see a decrease, and we're not seeing a decrease because we're not addressing the underlying problem. These are people that are in crisis, and I don't prescribe to the idea that they're mentally ill, because it's usually people that aren't mentally ill. They're going through a crisis though, or there are some issues.
Interesting.
So I don't like to label people, and we teach people don't really focus on that. Focus on their behaviors, because a lot of people just don't know how to respond, and if those behaviors are left unaddressed, or there's no intervention for someone who's starting off at a lower level, it grows into these violent actions. So that's my opinion, and there's a lot of studies to back this up as well.
So that makes a lot of sense to me, and it's interesting because I always assumed, wrongly now that I know, that they're mentally ill people who are highly traumatized and they're reacting from trauma. So I'm glad that you have schooled me and everybody else on that. Nancy, what is your perspective on this?
So that's an interesting one because, I mean, my last sort of employment outside of my own business was with the United Nations. And the one thing that I will say is that my last post was in New York for 6 years. So we heard a lot about active shooter, active shooter, active shooter. Outside of the US, you don't hear as much about it. And I mean, we hear about the occasional, the rare situation in other countries, whether it be here in Canada or whether it be somewhere else. So a great deal of my focus was truly more towards terrorism, but there's a common thread there that Jean picked up on, that this is about terrorizing people. So, you know, his points about who and why are every bit important as being prepared. And the problem with, you know, again, I just want to build on what you said, Jean. That whole idea of being prepared is not a bad thing, but you're not decreasing the level of terrorism, the terror that people feel. And indeed, with a lot of the preparation, you're increasing the terror and the sense of terror and the expectation. So, not to say don't train, don't prepare, but you are actually feeding into the goals of the people doing this, because it is so much like terrorism. They want to terrorize people. Here's the way I'm going to do it. And the more that we prepare and worry about it, and that fear and a bit of fear mongering even, is what builds that terror, and they succeed.
This has been extraordinarily insightful already, and I have so many other questions. So now that we've talked about, it's very clear that we need to be able to nip this when they're just stealing, you know, bubble gum from the store. Like, that's not quite the right analogy, but where do we, so talk to us about what are the signs that we should be looking at when we meet a neighbor, for example, or anybody. Like, how do we start to spot the early signs that somebody could become a terrorist? An active shooter is a terrorist. So now that we've kind of defined that, it's an act of terror. So what are some of those early signs that we should be looking for?
Well, I'll jump in first. And Nancy, you're going to probably agree with me, I would imagine, because it really is so closely linked to terrorism. In fact, you know, terrorism has sort of fallen into the category that's associated with active shooters, because they talk about, you know, religious ideologies that come through and things like that. So it always starts, there was a study done in 2003, and there's another study that just came out, which they came up with the same thing. The very first thing is that the shooters start off with a grievance. There's something that they feel they've been personally wronged. And it could be they were turned down by, you know, someone they wanted to date. It could be that they got fired or got in trouble at school, or their parents, you know, were disciplinarians. They didn't like that. It could be a religion, you know, that they kind of fell into a religious belief that everyone else is bad if they don't believe what they believe. It's now getting into politics, and we're seeing this on both sides of politics, where you have, if you're the opposite side, you are the enemy. And it's a very dangerous game. But they look at governments as well, that the government has let me down. And what ends up happening is, if that's not addressed, if you're asking about what do you look for someone who's been through that. Most of us, we understand if you know, if I like someone and they turn me down, they don't want to go out with me on a date, I'm going to be upset, but I'm not going to go off the deep end. Most people know how to deal with that. There are some people that don't have those skills. And so if you identify someone early on where their behavior starts to change, where they used to be very outgoing, or if they're in school, their grades were really good and all of a sudden their grades start dropping for no reason, those are the things you're looking for. You're looking for those initial signs of there's a grievance going on. If you intervene at that point, you have an incredibly great chance of stopping them from going any further. But if it's left unchecked, it moves to the next level, which is violent ideation. And they start thinking, okay, you don't want to go out with me? I'm going to teach you a lesson. And then as it starts to form, it's, you know, I always say it's like if you've ever boiled milk. So anyone that's ever made hot chocolate, or my favorite, pudding, you put milk on the pot, right? You know, and you have the heat, and you realize that if as that heat starts to go, you know, the milk will start to move a little bit, and that's the beginning phase. That's where there's some friction, some stuff going on, and it starts to bubble. But you know, if you don't watch it really quick, all of a sudden milk is all over the place. It boils up really fast, and that's what happens. There's a pathway to violence, and if you get on early, you can take that pot off that heat, and the violence stops. That they won't go to the next level, and you can help intervene, help teach them how to navigate the difficulties that they don't know how to do in social situations, or, you know, whatever the problem is. You can address it early on. You really have a great chance of stopping it.
Amazing.
That is,
Yeah,
that's so interesting. Because when it comes to sort of the more what we think of as more traditional types of terrorism, there was a study done by the SUFAN, I'm going to get the name wrong, SUFAN, I want to say organization anyhow, but amazing people. And this was done quite a while back, and a friend of mine was involved in the study. And it's interesting that they determined, because what countries were having terrorism, where was terrorism coming from, what was going. And so much of this goes right back to issues of if we can provide people with, you know, bring them out, lift them out of poverty, basic needs, education was so important. Having work and purpose and being a contributing member of society, then we have less of the situation. So I think you're hitting right on the head. And in recent times, we've just poverty levels skyrocket, homelessness skyrocket, housing out of reach for people, people not having work or not being able to go back to work, or losing their businesses. So many of these things have fed into the things that are the very contributors to someone shifting to that type of a mentality. You know, you've talked about the person doing, you know, feeling personally wronged. And then there's the ideological part of this as well. And you hit on both. And I couldn't agree more. But I think that's where we've got to hit it. And that's not going to happen overnight. This is long-term change, because we've gone way off track right now. And it's going to be a long time before we can bring it back on. But we have to focus. So as important as, I mean, I worked for UNICEF for years. As important as food and, you know, shelter are, so is education. Because over time, it is only education that is going to shift and change and bring people along and make them contribute members of society and feeling.
yeah. This is there's so much in here that I want to unpack. And this is where my little piece of the world with Standing Strong is I'm going for, because we're so against each other. I put out a video a couple of days ago around what are you standing strong for versus against, because this is a body language of I'm going to stand strong versus this is a body language of I'm going to stand strong. One is going to be, I'm going to beat the living shit out of you. Not that I would actually even know how to hit somebody. I have no idea how to fight.
I'll teach you.
I would just hit a high note and deafen somebody in nowhere. I don't know. See, we need a little bit of comedy in the middle of all this, because it's heavy. But it's interesting, because I had a lot of people going, oh my God, yes. And then, but I also had some pushback. Really, yeah, but we got to stand up for this and stand up. And I'm like, you're not. The problem is if you need to be right, then there's never, and you need, where's that coming from? Is that need that you talked about of like, I've been wronged and I have to be right and I need to be seen and heard. And so when we are in that, you know, and I think that part of the solution is that we need to, and I'm going to say this as a person who gets paid to do television, but we need to hold the media more accountable because they are causing more of the division. They are causing more of the fighting. And it goes back to what you said around education. Education is everything. I still remember when I was in university, I got into Teachers College, only like 100 out of 5,000 people get in, and I dropped out after a year. I was doing it concurrently with my other degree. And I dropped out because I kept being criticized for being too creative with children. So I refused to put them in desks in rows. I would literally like, great, you got a math lesson. Let's circle up. We're going to do some body rhythms. We're going to do some dance. Look at these rhythms. Now let's add some numbers, right? And I would literally do these creative, really cool things because it was about listening and interacting. And I was getting like a C, right? And eventually like, I just dropped out because I'm like, I can't be part of a system that are training people not to think, training people not to be critical thinkers, and basically getting them ready for the office. And I had such an issue for that. And then interestingly, says a person who doesn't have a degree, I saw a posting with the Royal Conservatory of Music of Canada for an educational consultant. And you didn't have to necessarily have a teaching degree, but you had to have extensive teaching experience and understand how to integrate the 8 different multiple intelligences into singing, dancing, acting, or visual. In my case, it was the first 3, definitely not visual. And it was so interesting because I would go into the, like, you know, Nancy, you're like me, you're Canadian. So they would put me into like the inner city schools in like Parkdale and Jane and Finch. Like it's kind of like the Harlem in the you know, of New York and South Central. And I'm like this little like 25-year-old like, you know, and I'm little now. You should have seen how little I was back then, like 110 pounds. Walking in there, I didn't even worry about it. People are people. They're human. You treat somebody like a human being, they're going to treat you back like a human being. But I used to go in there and I would always start in a circle and meditate with these children and just set the intention. And the principals used to always come by and they'd be like, I don't understand how these children who are pummeling each other all the time are working together. And I'm like, it's really not that hard because we're so focused. If you actually look at studies, and again, this is my education background coming out, cognitive thought doesn't kick in until 7 or 8 years old, and yet we're pushing our children to learn the alphabet and be able to read and write at like 3 or 4 years old, and it's some kind of a prize. Well, we should be, and this is probably tomorrow's conversation that we're having around how we're raising children. This is probably, I'm doing tomorrow's live. But we have all those formative years where we could be training kids to listen to each other, sing together, learn how to dance together, learn on those social skills where they learn to be open and communicate. And we're so focused teaching math and science that's going to do nothing for us. So to reiterate this, it's about education. It's about seeing the signs early. It's about people intervening immediately. And it's about taking down the media a little bit and how we are being divided. And I think holding our leaders more accountable on their behavior. So here's my, oh, go ahead, Nancy. You look like you're ready to pop on this. Now that I've done my spiel.
That I want to jump on because it's so important in all of that. And when we say, you know, education, our education system is also broken. And, you know, one of the things that isn't taught, even in the later grades, is critical thinking. And people are not taught to think for themselves, to work things out, to logic, to, you know, and all of these things are so incredibly important. And we've seen that. We've seen that with conspiracy theories. We've seen people just jumping on bandwagons because it feels good. But without the skills to critically think, is this right for me? So, yeah, just to what you said, critical thinking, so important.
Yeah. I mean, I have a neighbor who I love and adore, but she has never, ever questioned anything in her whole life. And she had a complete meltdown about the gay pride party that we were having in the building. She called me, the person who's been fighting for human rights her whole life. And I'm like, don't get triggered, stay present, stay present. And she's like, can you believe the board is spending $1,000 on this, da, 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 da. And I was like, stay present, stay present. I'm like, they're human beings. I don't understand. But this is a person who's a beautiful human being, but she has never bothered to question her religion. that tells her that they're bad and that they're evil. She has never questioned her parents' authority and what they taught her. She has never questioned anything. Hopefully she's not watching this. I just realized that.
Always.
You know what? She's not really on social media. It's fine. But, you know, and she's a beautiful person, but it's like how many beautiful people out there are raised the way they're raised and they don't question it. And one thing, you know, that I really want to see is that people stop making choices or stop boxing things in until they've actually been curious. And that goes back to the critical thinking piece.
Yep. Curiosity.
Yeah, I've been arguing critical thinking for years. Because no, you said it, Nancy. You were. I saw you, and I was like, "Good, she's gonna cover." I already knew you were gonna cover it because Cindy, when you said critical thinking, I was like, "Yes, that's exactly the that we are not getting it." And I think that there's probably a lot more people that do get it than don't. We don't see it on the media because I do believe the media does have a tendency to separate, and I don't know if that's by design. I don't know. I'm not going to get into the reasons that it could be, but there is so much division because it's more exciting when there's more arguing and fighting instead of people finding ways to work together. And I think that's definitely part of it. And it's back to what you were. I just saw a TED Talk a week or two ago, and it was somebody. He was a scientist, and he used dancers in his presentation. I don't know if you've seen this. I'll send it to you. So I'll send it to you.
Oh, that's cool.
And he used it to explain how light moves, and it was. I don't like dance. I'll tell you that right now because I had two sisters that were dancers that I had to go to every recital as a kid.
Oh.
I'm traumatized. So
okay, I will not do any ballet for you.
Yeah, all of that. I watched all of that. Oh my, everything. but all kidding aside, I mean, it was interesting. So it's finding new ways to teach is really important. I think education is something that we're missing because everyone's so boxed into one way of doing things. And we have to have that. Well, why do we do it that way? And every time I ask that question of a client or anybody, and they say, well, it's how we always did it. Well, why? I mean, is it working? I wouldn't be here if it was working, and we start talking about it. Oh, okay. But it's hard to get that conversation going. And then ego plays into it. And we're like, well, that's how we're doing it. Okay. Well, you're not going to get anywhere if you don't have an open mind. I always tell everyone, I might disagree with you. Prove me wrong. I want to hear your side of it, and I'll tell you my side. And maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I don't think I am, but show. At least I want to hear it. I want to hear it because even if I still disagree with you, there's a better understanding, and that relationship is deeper between you and the other person. We don't have that. We're so social media heavy that there's no real conversations anymore. I look at a lot of the younger kids. I teach at the police academy, and it's funny. Some of the communication skills are not as good as when I was growing up, when there was no social media. I feel so old saying there was no social media, but that's how it was.
I think I'm probably in your age group. There wasn't my time either.
You're in your late 20s? Awesome. That's great.
Yes, I know. It's all the Botox. Oh my word. Yeah, I mean, it's really hard. So here's where I really want to talk about for everyday people. That's not the right wording. But how do I, for example, spot a predator? I'm going to use this. Nancy, when we were working on her talk, she already had an existing program called How to Spot a Predator Before They Become One. And we talked about body language, and I'm a body language expert, but I can spot it. I remember calling Nancy once going, I was in, I don't know where it was Bear Burger, and I said this guy was a total sexual predator, and I just stayed there. I was in a public place, I was fine, and I'm like, and we had that whole conversation, and when I went home and I Googled this guy, he had been arrested for rape. And he kept pushing me, and I had all the signs down, and then Nancy gave me insight into what I was seeing, because I'm a body language expert, but not looking for predators. But I knew something was off. I could tell that there was those issues, but she really solidified it for me. So I would love for both of you to speak on, for us in our everyday lives, what are we watching for in either body language or cues that is a warning that we need to walk away from the situation?
You want to go, Nancy? Or?
Okay. I mean, there are a number sort of tells. So first of all, I mean, I hear a lot of people say, well, I can tell when somebody's lying. Well, no, you can't. That that just isn't true, because yes, you might be able to tell when your child is lying. They're going to have some tells that you're very familiar with. But a true predator is going to have worked on this for a very long time. They look in the mirror. They make sure that they're not any of these kids out there. But there are certain things that, in order to get you to kind of cooperate, to come along, there's things like forced teaming. A lot of use of the words like we and us, like, well, we should do this, we should go there, and we ought to be upset about that. Sort of like we're in this together. So that's a pretty strong tell, because most people will speak about that and ask you how you feel about something, not just automatically include you in that. And one of the things I always talk about when the women's training is charm, because we've grown up believing that to be charming is, Prince Charming. But the reality is that charm is also a form of grooming. And so, one of the people who came on one of my said, never see the word charm again. I'm going to see harm. And I thought that was kind of cool. But yeah, that total charming and too good to be true attitude. Nobody is. People are for real. People who start giving you too many details, like, we're not letting this conversation go, and I'm going to give you all these details, and I'm maybe telling you too much about myself, and on and on. So that extra details, quite often there's going to be some gaslighting in there, typecasting as well. Things like, throw out a quasi insult and get defensive so that you're defending yourself, and and then engaging more, because if I can get you to defend you, you're going to engage with me, and I've got you. A thing called loan, doing unsolicited favors. One of the things that about is guilty around this as well. And I always use the example of, you're walking down the street, you've got a bag of oranges, right? Think about somebody that you truly trust and believe in, a man who, maybe your father, maybe it's your husband, who knows? Think about somebody who truly respects women, respects people, treats people well. Will they offer to help pick up the oranges? Yeah, of course they will. And if you say no, might they maybe offer a second time help? Perhaps. But will they insist and say, oh, don't be so silly, I'm going to pick up your oranges, carry on over, So here you've got somebody who is, not respecting your no. And I always talk about the good guy filter. Think about someone who you truly respectful. Would they do this? It seems on the surface like I'm just trying to help. What's wrong with you? Well, they're negative. What's wrong with you? I'm just trying to help, So things like that. The unsolicited promises, we don't talk in terms of, oh, I promise I'm not a predator. I'll help you with that. We don't talk in these kind of promises. But the big one for me is not respecting the word no. No is not the start of negotiation. And so when you say no to somebody and they come back with, whoa, okay, I might say a second time after that, you lost, because it's not the start of a negotiation. So those are a few things. Those are ones that I like to draw attention to. They're very easy things to sort of pick out of a conversation.
Nancy, this is like amazing. So I've got 2 comments on that, and I want Gene to add in his. The first is that I have kind of a rule that if I don't see somebody's prickly side, I'm worried. And then the second thing is what I've come to realize is, because I'm Middle Eastern, I'm first generation Canadian, and my dad's Palestinian, my mother is Lebanese. And in our culture, people don't hear no. Here, kuli kuli kuli, which is eat in Arabic, right? Imshi, 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 like kuli kuli, right? Like, I mean, you know enough Arabic because you were in the Middle East a lot, right? So I grew up in a household where they force food onto you and there isn't consent. But I've had to notice it myself because I've learned that behavior and I've had to unravel that. So for me, it's like what you said, Nancy, is right. Sometimes it's actually cultural. They're not actually a predator. sometimes it is
Yes.
cultural too. Like you talk about low, that's a whole other, I was going to talk about low and high context cultures. That's a whole other live. But I know now, but if you say no twice, then that's an issue. Then it's beyond cultural. So Jean, I'm sure you have lots to add to this.
No, it's fascinating because Nancy came from a little bit different angle, which I really appreciated. I look more physical stuff, more instead of conversational. So that was really good. And
Oh,
I
that's
agree that
awesome.
the no, and this is going to play into it. So think proxemics, how close someone is to you. You know, depending on where you are, your proxemics is going to change. Like if you're in an elevator, you're going to be very close to someone because you're forced to be in that, and that's a normal thing. But if you're out at a grocery store and someone walks right up next to you that you don't know, that's weird. That's not normal behavior. So you look for these things. You look for the distancing of people and how people move through an area. You're looking for their behaviors in and of themselves. Someone who is going to do an attack, they have certain threat indicators. They sometimes start tapping. You'll see that sometimes they put their chin down a little bit, and they like have a stare that they're going to. They'll walk directly to where their target that they're going to get. So there's behavioral things that you're looking for as well. It's not, it's Nancy's talking as if you're having a conversation, which is great. I look at it as before they even come to you. What are you looking for in an area? If people are all behaving a certain way in an area and then one person isn't, they're outside of that baseline of behavior, why is that person doing that? Why is that person only staring over there when everyone's just like looking around? That's a weird thing. And I challenge everyone, or I shouldn't say challenge, but I encourage everyone, people watch. I mean, it's really interesting. Go to a mall, go to a grocery store, and just watch how people flow through there. You'll see that there's patterns that are formed. And you want to always, every time you go somewhere, look at the patterns. Look how people are moving and interacting. And if someone isn't doing what everyone else is, that's the one you want to watch. You want to watch and see what they're doing, because those behaviors are really important to tell. And it might be completely innocent. They may be just doing that. I'm not saying they're guilty of anything, but those are the things that you want to start doing. And most importantly is, we live in, I know everyone thinks that the United States is the most violent country in the world. It really isn't. It's extremely safe compared to a lot of other countries. It just, you see more publicity about the United States, but we're really a very safe country. We really are a very safe country, and so safe that, in fact, and I think really all across the world, a lot of people have kind of bred out the paying attention to your body, paying attention to, why is the hair on the back of my neck sticking up? Why do I have this feeling something's
Not
wrong?
listening to instincts.
Because people aren't paying attention. That is biological. Our limbic system is designed to do that. And we've shut that off. And there's been so many, I don't want to go back to active shooter, but there's been so many active shooter incidents where the people that were on scene said, I was in my office and I thought I heard fireworks, so I looked out and someone was shooting. Well, how often do you hear fireworks at your office? But you don't want to believe it's happening because you don't think it's going to happen. We need to get back to start listening and trusting our gut instinct, because if you go somewhere and it doesn't seem like something's right, go. I tell my wife the same thing. I'm like, if you go to the store and you see something that's weird, go. There's no need to stay.
No,
You can get that stuff others.
No, this is like, I remember I was traveling with my family in the Middle East. My dad and I flew in to see my family in Jaffa, which is right next to Tel Aviv. And we crossed the border into Egypt, and we were in a city called Dahab, which means gold. And they were like, oh, we should stay here for the night. I'm like, hell no. I could see there was something wrong. It was partially what you said, Jean, about that gut feeling. But I was just noticing, and I understand that my Arabic is terrible. Like, I've got the basics like shukran, kifik. I don't remember my Arabic at all. And I had to convince 2 carloads of people who didn't really speak English to leave. And interestingly enough, within hours of us leaving, a bomb went off. We would have been dead. But I knew it. Even now I get shivers and I want to cry thinking about that moment. But learning to trust ourselves is so key. And I realize we are so over time with this live. It's amazing. But what I'd like to do is start to wrap up. Jean, where can people find you? Tell us more about your services, where people can find you. Same with you, Nancy, and then we're going to talk about Standing Strong song. Maybe I'll do a little song for you to cheer up a little bit for this conversation. Hopefully you actually listen to you because you're getting educated. So, Jean.
Okay. So what I do and what our company does is we provide workplace violence and active shooter training. We're differentiated in that we really are one of the very few organizations that focus on prevention more than anything else. We do provide that, but we provide a whole array of other services. A lot of training stuff. We also are in the security field, so we will look at your systems. We'll look at how everything is set up. We'll look at policies, all of that kind of stuff. You can find me on pretty much everywhere on social media. I try to be everywhere that I can, but you can find me at Survival Response. That's on Instagram and TikTok and Facebook, and LinkedIn. It's under Gene Petrino, GenePetrino, and then my website is survivalresponsellc.com.
Awesome. And just so everybody watching, on the replay, I'm going to take this and we're going to edit it and we're going to put like URLs and stuff coming up. Nancy, I know that you're retired, however, semi-retired, but talk to us about you.
Well, I loved hearing you, Jean, talk about trusting your instincts. That's actually the tagline to my business is, I got this, trust your instincts, because that is so incredibly important. Yeah, I mean, I am a speaker. I also do workshops. I've focused a lot of what I've done in the last years for women specifically, because I spent my life in a non-woman's environment, and I didn't realize the skills that I came out of that aren't common. So I do a lot of that, a lot of work for women. My TED Talk is Cottywomple, and it's, not having that absolute plan to get somewhere. Travel, go, do things, live your life, because a lot of the security stuff can feel sometimes inhibiting. So my big theme is do it. Just find the tools to do it in a way that you can feel confident. Make your voice resonate, your presence undeniable. Those are the kind of messages that I've got. So you can find me at igotthis.space. So I got this space. That's me.
I like that.
Awesome. Awesome. And if you want to be part of hashtag Standing Strong Song Movement, go to standingstrongsong.com. Jean, Nancy, this is gold, 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 gold. This has been remarkable. I love and appreciate you both so much. If we could have you two leading the charge on this, our whole world would change. That would be awesome.
Well, I have to say,
is that all it takes?
Because Cindy likes Jean, so I knew I was going to like Jean. But Jean, it was really great to meet you, and I loved hearing you.
Same here, Nancy. It was great.
Oh, so exciting. Perfect. Well, thanks. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching.